Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida, who represents his district in the capital of the United States of America. So it's only fitting that he's a fan of the team of America. It's been a minute since we've talked. Dallas Cowboys, let me know. Let go, unleash. What do you have to say, Dallas Cowboys?
So to quote somebody on TV, I feel like I'm ready to unleash. Look, here's the deal. Our quarterback, Dak Prescott, really good quarterback, amazing leader. It doesn't look like he's the guy. And it pains me because I like Dak. I root for Dak. But how many more years are we going to see the same thing? At the end of the day, the difference between, him and what we saw on Sunday between Burrows and Mahomes is you just got to deliver the ball on time, on target. And so, I know Kellen Moore is gone. I was never the biggest fan, but okay. I'm so happy that we're keeping our defensive coordinator because our defense was all world. They put on a Super Bowl performance. But at the end of the day, you got to deliver the football on time, on target. It's that simple.
I've got a couple of responses to that and things that I've been thinking about a lot, Congressman. Now, first of all, of course, everybody would love to have a Burrow or Mahomes. There's just not that many Burrow or Mahomes. And you don't have to have one to win the Super Bowl. And everybody points to Joe Flacco, and probably because there's not that many that you can point to, but you can definitely win the Super Bowl with an above-average quarterback. I'm with you, man. I've been a huge supporter, especially as a human being, of Dak Prescott. And this is where I've gotten. So I'm going to see how you feel with this. The quarterback I'm more interested in for Dak is the quarterback representing the Philadelphia Eagles. It's Jalen Hurts. See, I think Dak, you're right to talk about on time. I mean, deliver the ball on time. My biggest concern about Dak is inconsistent decision-making. So as good as Kellen Moore was, and he's good, and he'll be good with the Chargers, I just want a new set of eyes that comes in like they did with Jalen Hurts and says, okay, this is what this guy does really well. Let's design an offense to his strengths, and the entire project now is about maximizing Dak Prescott because for better or worse, he will be the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys.
No, I totally agree with you. He's going to be our quarterback. And like I said, is Dak, is he a top 15 quarterback? 100%. Is he a top 10 quarterback? I could get there.
Right.
Here's the deal. If we're going to stay and continue this line, and I agree with you, we are. Yes, you have to reevaluate the offensive scheme. Two, our offensive line, which actually played really well considering the injuries and the restructuring, we got to make sure we're focused on being able to deliver yards running the football. We cannot have a situation where we're 2 yards in a cloud of dust because of offensive line situations and different things like that. Losing Tony Pollard in that game was huge for us because he was our game breaker in the backfield. So there were a lot of things. And look, we were right there. You're talking about the CeeDee Lamb throw, the seam route down the middle of the field. You're talking about some of the other throws. It's 1 or 2 throws is the difference in that game. The backbreaker for me was 2nd and 2 at the 12. And, he forced it to CeeDee. And no Schultz doubt. Is in the flat. Alone. Honestly, it's 2nd and 2. We at the 12.
Congressman, that's when I lost hope. It is. That's when I was like, oh, all of a sudden, it's a back and forth. It's a fist fight. And I have hope in the Cowboys on that turnover. I was crushed.
Right. But look, let me say this. Real quick, last thing I'm going to say. To Dak Prescott specifically, I think he's phenomenal. I think he is a top-tier guy 100%, top-tier quarterback 100%. But in these games, it's 2 or 3 throws. That's simply what it is. So whatever we got to do to make that work, let's make it work. Let's go be successful. In terms of roster, and this is where I got to give it to Jerry Jones and Will McClain and Stephen Jones and the entire group over there. Man, our roster, I'll put that up against anybody, period. I think we have the best talent in football.
It's funny, and I'm going to be too cute with the metaphor here, but we're going to play with this for just a moment. Before the congressman jumped on with us here, he made a joke with me that his office studio setup was designed for First Take or Undisputed. But instead, here we are talking about the interest of the nation. And it strikes me that, but for a few turns, Congressman, you and I could be sitting together across a desk at ESPN or Fox Sports. I'm not just saying that. It probably is true, but for a few turns. As you mentioned, hey, a throw or two and a different outcome in that game. And then that leads me to you, and that leads me to the United States of America and the leadership of the Republican Party. Here you are today. You are young. You are you are, look, I don't know what the right word to use is. The word popular. It may be you are popular, and it's not that, but for one or two turns, you're the Speaker of the House, but your name was put forward. Let's just talk about that for a minute. And I haven't talked to you. I know you've been on Fox News. When it happened, did you know it was happening? Did you know it was going to happen? Were you blown away as you were there for successive votes? I'm just curious back into your mind. Here's a guy. Maybe you could have been on First Take. Maybe you could have been in financial services for the rest of your life. Instead, your name is being forwarded for Speaker of the House.
So I knew it was coming because there was a discussion that morning amongst the members who were voting in opposition at the time. So I knew that it was coming. When it was first brought up in the room, man, I got to tell you, it was surreal. Like I was really beside myself, not in a negative way, but at that point, the moment became way bigger than just me and what I was doing. It was about the journey. It was about my family. It was about, the conservative movement, things that I'm really passionate about. And now you're putting yourself into this area, this space where now you're thinking on historical lines and what does all that mean? So when it came up in conversation, I was silent for probably about 30, 45 minutes. I was like, I can't agree or disagree with it. I need to think about this. And so that's kind of what happened. So going on the floor, I knew going in. When my name was put in nomination, that's when it became real. It was real before, but then it's real because now it's happening live. Members on the floor are looking at me like, what is going on? It was, man, for me personally, it was really cool to witness, even though obviously we're going through our work that week. And I really try to take a step back and just kind of let it all sink in because it's not something many members of Congress get to say in the history of Congress, for that matter.
No, and as somebody pointed out, between you and Hakeem Jeffries, first time that there's been a nominee, I believe, on both sides of the aisle for majority and minority leader. Hey, I'm curious, what's it done to your relationship with Kevin McCarthy?
Oh, I think it's made it a better relationship. The thing about it is, even as that was going down, we kept open lines of communication because what was most important is that Republicans found the pathway to get to a resolution so we can govern and do the things that we were all elected to do. So in that process, it was about being an honest broker, being forthright. Here's what's going on. I mean, obviously not telling them everything that's going on, but here's what I do know. Let's sit down and talk. What are some of the issues that need to get worked out? Can we find a pathway for that? And so, it just wasn't the two of us. There were many people around that table to help, bring the two sides together. And that's kind of how we landed.
From my perspective, which, by the way, and I said this publicly on television, I was supportive of the struggle on the floor for the leadership of the Republican Party. I thought it reflected some of the struggle in the nation. And I think you gave very, very eloquent voice to that when I would hear you talk with John Roberts or Sandra Smith during the moment or whatever it may be. And I will say, I've been somewhat pleasantly surprised to see the way that Kevin has come out as Speaker of the House and really, quite honestly, played offense. But I'm curious, from your perspective and from that, for that matter, from the perspective of the Freedom Caucus, how do you feel about the beginning, the initial couple weeks of the speakership of Kevin McCarthy?
Well, from my vantage point, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues in Freedom Caucus, but I would say it's been very positive. It's been good to see the stances that he's taken, the way he's gone about his business now being Speaker of the House. I know the thing that's been fire in social media has been his comments on committee assignments with Swalwell and Schiff and Ilhan Omar and dealing with that one reporter. But it's also been about the way I think we've been communicating internally. I think it's been refreshing in Congress, something that a lot of members who've been here for some time have all quietly been very concerned about is the level of communications. And so that's something that's really been opened up. He's been a big part of that. And, we just take it week by week.
So let me ask you a question that I was just reading his new book, a book by Trey Gowdy. And I don't want to put words in Trey's mouth, but when you write 250 pages, if I don't come away with some idea of what you're talking about, then it's either I'm an idiot or it wasn't communicated clearly. So I think I have the ability to at least characterize his point of view. And Trey's always welcome here with me or you to reframe it if I get it wrong. And also, by the way, I've heard this from someone like Congressman Dan Crenshaw of Texas. There's a real skepticism of the Freedom Caucus among those types of representatives. And if I'm reading, not between the lines, but the lines of Trey's new book, clearly his belief is that the Freedom Caucus is taking fights into the public that are traditionally done behind the scenes, and they're doing it for personal benefit, that it doesn't actually help the cause or conservatism, but it helps individual members in their acquiring of fame. What would you say to that argument about the tactics of the Freedom Caucus?
I would say I would agree with the first part and not the second. Are these things being brought into the fore, which were typically held behind closed doors? Sometimes, yes. And I think the reason why sometimes it has to be brought out into the public is because the true leverage points, the true push and pull that happens here in Washington typically has always been by force of assignments from, a speaker or a leader, force of fundraising by a speaker or a leader, or force by, the web of interest groups that maneuver around Capitol Hill. So if you keep everything behind closed doors, then the people don't get to see the machinations of some of this stuff, and it takes away their ability to weigh in. Now, to the second piece about people trying to do that for personal gain, I actually do disagree with that. And the reason why is a couple. Number one, if somebody gets popular, myself, that's just a byproduct of people wanting to hear what I have to say and see me more and do that stuff. But I could tell you the vast majority of members, frankly, all the members, they're not doing this to try to build name IDs and so on and so forth. That comes as a byproduct of them communicating effectively or being a thought leader or being a fighter, quote unquote, or whatever the case might be. There are members on Capitol Hill who everybody seems to know, or there are members that nobody seems to know. That's all dependent on how each member decides to conduct themselves and handle their business. You brought them up, so I don't want to single them out, but with Dan Crenshaw, Dan does a lot of media. He chooses to do that. I do a lot of media. I choose to do that. That's just the way we go about our business. And so I think that it's not the right vein to say that the Freedom Caucus only does it because they want notoriety. The Freedom Caucus has these fights because they passionately care about the nation. And I would say the difference between Freedom Caucus members and probably other members of the Republican conference is that we completely agree on strategy. We disagree on the tactical way to get there. It's a difference in tactics.
Oh, you
the
mean,
byproduct
can
of
I
that
reframe what you just said? Do you
yeah.
mean you agree on goals, but disagree on tactics on how to get to the goals? Do you think
absolutely.
there is? Okay, do you think there is broad
yeah.
agreement between the Freedom Caucus and the broader Republican constituency in Congress on where we want to take the nation?
I do, actually, because I've had these conversations with members from different caucuses, different members from different parts of the country. The thing I've been able to really get to the last year and a half here is building relationships with colleagues who are in different factions, quote unquote, of our conference. So I know that there are a lot of agreements, the vast majority of agreements from a policy perspective, the goals, if you will. The difference is, okay, what's the tactical way we're going to accomplish the mission? I think that's where the difference is. And so Freedom Caucus members, myself included, when I came here, I didn't come here just to sit quietly and just listen to what we're doing. I came here to actually, really be forward thinking and outward about my viewpoints, what I think needs to occur. What are the passions that I hear from my district and from other people around the country? And if we're not being successful on Capitol Hill, well, let's just not continue the same thing. Let's rethink the tactics. Let's rethink the strategy. Maybe some dynamics have changed, and we need to bring that fresh thought into the process.
I get what you're talking about.
I conduct myself.
By the way, that is a fight within conservatism at large, a fight over tactics, meaning I do think there is a philosophical debate taking place on whether or not one stands by their principles to their death, metaphorically, or do you have to fight fire with fire? I do think there is a constituency within conservatism that says if the left is going to do X, then you have to do Y. And you can't simply stand by your libertarian or conservative principles while they undercut or lie or whatever it may be. You're going to have fight fire with fire. And I think that's an interesting, it's not just interesting, it's a very important tactical philosophical question. But I appreciate the optimism you also give me and I'm not sure I believe you 100%. Not that I think that you're not telling the truth. I just... I don't know that I can have faith that everybody has the same goal. That's what I'm saying, Congressman. I want to, and you're the guy behind the scenes, and you're the one talking to them, and I want to believe that. And by the way, I have no problem in your and my relationship. Actually, I think you're one of the guys who would appreciate me saying, hey, I think you're wrong on something, just like we would on First Take. But I take optimism. I want to believe what you have to say, that everybody sees the same vision of America.
Yeah. Like, why would there be a disagreement in that? I don't think Republicans disagree on that. Like, look,
really?
Like I said, I talk to a lot of members. We have these conversations. I'm not going to say who, but even when we bring up specific policy ideas, your idea might be to look at it, from the 30-degree mark. My idea might be to look at it from the 70-degree mark. But we're all looking at the same target. At the same target. And I think that's the key thing about what happens up here. There's just, different ways to skin the cat. I told you, I appreciate about you that I don't think you would mind at all if I said, here's where I think you're wrong. I also appreciate about you that you answer my questions directly. I mean, you talk about doing a lot of media and whatever. It's a true rarity. Like, you are responding directly to what I have to say and not what it is you just want to say. So on that note, hey, tell me about George Santos, please. I mean, I think you guys had a meeting about him today. I got to be real. I don't think I've invested in this story very deeply. It just seems like every time I look up, hey, maybe that means I have the perfect perspective on what is getting through to the general public. Right.
It just seems like no lie is too small or no lie is too big.
With George specifically, look, I think two things. One, what happened between him and his election and with his voters, that's something his district has to handle. I feel that way about every member that might go through something. Your voters sent you. If they don't want to send you anymore, then there's an election that's coming very, very soon. It's one of the reasons why I think that people will say, oh, man, you guys in Congress, you're having to run all the time. That's not healthy. And I'm like, no, it's very healthy. We are the people's body for a reason. You should have to be able to choose us time and time again. So that's number one. Number two, what happened today, and this is all driven by George. I wasn't a part of it. I don't really know anybody that really was. He decided that it was actually in the best interest to recuse himself from committee work, to limit the distraction that has come. I actually think it was a mature thing to do, and I think it was a good thing to do on behalf of Republican members who are trying to find ways to be supportive in the midst of something that just doesn't look good. And so, and frankly, is not good. But that's the second piece of it. Now, we have Democrats on the other side of the aisle who do not bat an eye on supporting somebody who's done egregious things. You have Richard Blumenthal in the Senate. The man lied about his service. The Democrats didn't bat an eye. He's still in the United Senate today. And let's not forget that John Fetterman is a United States Senator, everybody. The Democrats knew of his health issues. They knew he was recovering from a stroke. They did not say, you know what, you're not fully recovered. In the interest of the institution, it's better if you just take time. We'll try to find somebody else to run. That's not what happened. They turned a blind eye. They covered for him. They wouldn't talk about his health issues. The media wouldn't do that either. Like, part of our job is being able to listen and to interact and debate over issues, not just in front of the cameras, but also with colleagues behind closed doors. How can he functionally do the job? I'm not talking about, what was the phrase they threw out? Ableism or whatever that mess is. I'm not calling it a mess. It's a legitimate thing, but that's the term that they used. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the functional ability to do the job of the United States Senator. They didn't bat an eye. So with George Santos, my position has been, look, he's here now. If he chooses to resign, that'll be his choice. If his voters don't want to bring him back, that will be their choice, period.
Have you found out, was he a world-class volleyball player at Brook?
Nah, I think even George knows. I've seen that body. It ain't, I've seen him walking around the suit. Ain't no volleyball player there, man. It's just not happening. I'm sorry, George. Look, man, not really checking you out, but never got the sense of volleyball player. Maybe Randy Feenstra. I could see that.
Like 6'4",
my colleague from
6'5",
Iowa.
aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Him and Blake Moore is 6'5", good athlete, plays on the basketball team, football team, baseball team. Blake, I could see. George, no, I can't see it.
In Congress, how many sports would you emerge as the top? How many intramural congressional sports is Byron Donalds the number one pick on, or should Byron Donalds be the number one pick on?
Well, listen, definitely the football team. Let me just go ahead and say that, because
no one out there in Congress has a better argument than you. I haven't done my research here, so I don't know who else is in there on this.
No, actually, no, seriously, the number one pick here in Congress in football and in basketball is Blake Moore out of Utah. Tremendous athlete, 6'5". He plays quarterback for us. I mean, he dang near scored 25 of our points in the basketball game. He's just a really good athlete, and he stays in shape. The tough thing on Capitol Hill, frankly, is finding time to stay in shape and manage your skill. The number one draft pick on baseball is actually, my colleague Greg Stubbe, who's currently recovering right now from the incident he had. Looks like he's going to try to join us back here at the end of the month. But he's doing well and recuperating. But we're just happy that he survived that fall.
I love this conversation for a minute.
I'm like number 3, number 4, definitely in football. I'm number 3, number 4. You got to pass first.
Let's put a basketball team together, and if you have to pick somebody from the Democratic side of the aisle for your squad, which way are you going?
Oh, you know what? I forget his name, but he's really good. He's actually really good. He played, I think, Division II or Division I college basketball.
What state? Do you know?
Nah, I don't. See, this is the problem on Capitol Hill. The Democrats and Republicans. This whole place doesn't really breed collaboration. The Democrats have their meetings, we have our meetings. We only see each other really on the floor, in committee, and if we do intramural stuff. So it's difficult sometimes, unless you had a previous relationship, to actually build a relationship with the other side. I've always believed it's one of the things that actually breeds the contempt that I guess comes across on news media up here on Capitol Hill. Because you don't interact much. Yeah, you don't interact much. So that's what I'm saying. That guy, he knows who I'm talking about. He's really good, but I just can't remember his name. But myself, Blake Moore, there's a couple of us.
But you know what you're pointing out? You said intramural. It's just another example of the value of sports in the world, to turn people back into human beings, right? Yeah. For a moment, to erase the R and the D, or the rich and the poor, or the black and the white, and just to turn people back into human beings. Man, there's so many reasons I love sports, and I'm sure you as well. But that's one of them. That's just such a value in our culture.
Oh, real quick, let me give you one, though. So on the football team, it's my guy, Jimmy Panetta. This is Leon Panetta's son. Jimmy Panetta plays middle linebacker for us. Really good guy. Me and Jimmy, we really bonded over football. I mean, look, we disagree on politics, but on football, we bonded and, we have a good relationship. Jimmy's a good dude. Except when it comes to politics, then his answers are ridiculous and what he votes on is ridiculous. But that's
I don't know how much time I have left with you, but I want to see if I can hit at least one more serious topic with you, and that is Tyree Nichols, okay?
Yes.
And what I want to ask you is this. It's not a waste of time because it's worthy of everyone saying how horrific it was, right? But the only reason I say that is because it's universal. I think everyone sees it and says universally horrific, right? And then we go to the next step, which is these 5 individuals plus perhaps more need to be held accountable. And we could dissect, you and I, but it's been dissected, how awful their behavior was. The question I want to ask you is what do you think of the conversation that is I don't know if it's successfully, but certainly attempted to be broadened on law enforcement at large, and whether or not the system is unjust, and whether or not there's any systemic reforms to be made that are illustrated by what happened to Tyree Nichols? Well,
look, the first thing, man, is that video is horrific. It can't happen, period. I think obviously everybody knows that, but stuff like that, it just can't happen. Now, I'm not a member of Congress who would sit there and be like, okay, now let's go pass some law so that it never happens again, because the history of Congress is we run around saying we're going to make sure this never happens again. We pass some law. It actually has worse repercussions for what's happening on the issue. And while we took our victory lap, we're on to the next thing. And we don't go back to actually figure out if what we did made sense or is actually working. So I think from a policy perspective, there were bills on policing. The Tim Scott bill, the Justice Act, is one that comes to mind, because what that bill actually would have done was help with training and so on and so forth, and funding for body cams after what happened with George Floyd. The Democrats in the Senate filibustered the bill. They said it didn't go far enough. They wanted to end qualified immunity, which would have eviscerated police departments. So the one thing I've kind of always seen through this piece is law enforcement starts at home. It's your chief of police. It's your sheriff. It's the training systems that they put in place. It's the recruitment efforts that they put in place. And so what's happened in law enforcement, especially the last couple of years, any sheriff or police chief will tell you, they have had the hardest time recruiting people into the world of being a police officer. Because, I mean, look, people aren't dumb. They see how police are being vilified on TV. Do they want to sign up for that and put their not just their lives on the line, which police officers do, but their fiscal health on the line, their families on the line in case something goes wrong? Most people don't want to do that. So recruitment is down in law enforcement. That's why when these issues come up, we have to be very careful how we talk about them. We can't sensationalize them and politicize them. It has to be about the facts. Because when you're off that issue, man, those officers, they got families, they got friends. They're white, they're black, they're Hispanic. A lot of them serve our communities very, very well. So if you're going to talk about policy, the first policy starts at home. What's going on with recruitment? What's going on with training? And that's the key things that I think you have to figure out a way to address. What we found out in Memphis is that after all the things that happened with George Floyd and all the protests, the riots, the condemning of police, etc., they have actually ratcheted down their benchmarks for what it takes to become a police officer. So the levels have decreased in terms of the qualifications. That's not good for communities.
Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain Podcast for full episodes right now.